Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming out tonight. And I have the pleasure to introduce a good friend of mine, Miss Abby Burnett. Abby is she is the best grave historian that I know. And so I met Abby, oh my goodness, 2010-ish, maybe 12, I can't remember. But her first book actually came out. When'd your first book come out?
In 2014.
In 2014. I met you right before we talked, right before.
I was researching it.
You were researching.
Here.
Yes, you were. And so I had the pleasure of meeting her. This lady can research. She can dig to the bottom. She can find everything in between. Her first book is called Gone to the Grave. It's for sale out here at the table. Her second book is Though Silent, They Speak. I had the opportunity to go through here and proof and read through there. The one thing that really caught my attention, when you look at a book as a historian, I look at the table of contents briefly. I look for this. I look for the notes. As a historian, I want to know the notes. I want to know what they've done. This lady has done the footwork for you. I mentioned one time on a video here a couple days ago, and it just came out of my mouth. I thought, oh, that is so good. I bragged on myself when I finished. This is actually a good book just to grab. And if you want to go across Arkansas with a theme in mind, you can travel Arkansas on just a daycation, 2 or 3 daycation, whatever it is, and you can go to cemeteries and investigate and bring this along with you as a guidebook. And so I appreciate the opportunity to proof and go through it. Thank you very much. And the books are for sale out here, $25 each. And she'll be out there right after she speaks. She's going to go out there. She has 80 miles to go tonight. And so we would need to let her get out as soon as we can. Here we go. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. Thank you all for letting me come and talk about my new book, which I'm excited about because cemeteries are my happy place. And I got to spend a lot of time in graveyards doing this research. So the book, the title for the book comes from these tombstones. If you've been in any cemetery anywhere, you've probably seen tree trunks. And the tree trunks have got this in the middle. This is the woodmen of the world. They were a fraternal lodge that sold insurance. And when you died, you were given one of these special stones. And so their motto is in Latin on every stone. It's Dum Tacet Clamet, which translates as, though silent, he speaks. Meaning that a person who is silent, i.e. dead, is still speaking through their deeds, their accomplishments, people's memories, through their legacy. And so that big tombstone is also still speaking about the person. Now, when I was putting the book together, I was looking for a photograph for the cover, and there was a man on Facebook named Hal Mitzenmacher. I've never met him, but he does these beautiful, moody night shots in Ozark graveyards, long exposures, I think. And so he very kindly gave me 4 of his photos to send to the press, and they chose this one. This is Cave Mountain Cemetery up above the Buffalo River. It's a beautiful place. It has some interesting stones, including a man who has 2 death dates, the day he was shot and the day he died. So it's an interesting place, but it wouldn't have been my first choice for the book cover. If they had let the author have a say, which they don't, I would have taken this picture of Hal's. These are the AG grave houses. Now I see why they didn't use it. This on a cover would look like a book about architecture. But in fact, these little houses are known as grave houses. They are built over the graves of 2 children. This is what they look like from the front in daytime. And they are the best known, best documented, best preserved grave houses in the Ozarks. The grave houses have no known function. They are built over graves. They are not mausoleums. There are no coffins. They're not columbariums. They don't hold ashes. They don't cover the entrance to crypts. They simply are little buildings, and the meaning has been lost. We don't really know why they were built. We do know that the Ozarks once had many, many more than there are now. In the time I've been looking for them, 5 have been torn down, and 3 or 4 I'm sure have fallen down by now. They are just disappearing. But the AG houses, the family comes back from Texas and they do restoration. Now, I was fortunate when I first found the houses, and I have a really strong feeling of pride and ownership in them, I think. I was able to reach the family patriarch, Frank Agee, and he talked to me about how the houses were built, and he sent me this picture. And this shows the man, the grandfather who built the houses. It shows what they looked like when they were brand new. They had a two-tone paint job, and this is an amazing thing to actually have a photo of what they look like. The one on the left is for an unnamed infant. The one on the right was a 2.5-year-old boy named Guthrie Agee. Oddly, the family had also lost 2 little girls who did not get houses, but the grandfather was in ill health, and perhaps he meant to keep going, and he simply didn't get to do that. But the Agee grave houses are an amazing thing, and they're here in the Arkansas Ozarks. But so are other amazing things. We have coffins. They are above ground, there are no bodies in them, but they represent the coffin that's underneath. We have comb graves, C-O-M-B, also known as tent. They are little like pup tents, but they also are very susceptible to gravity, and over time the stone tends to fall apart and they don't have end pieces. And lastly, we have necked discoids. This is here in Baxter County, in I believe it's Old Athens Cemetery. These look like little people sitting up in their graves. They have head, neck, and shoulders. These are also built into a false crypt, an empty box. And so more of the things that we have in the Ozarks that we just don't see in other parts of the state. But one thing about doing this book was I got to drive all over Arkansas, all 75 counties, over and over again. I wish I'd kept my maps, because I crisscrossed the state looking for interesting things. And there are so many things I was not expecting. So this is just a few quick things that I did not expect to find. Shells on graves. These are mussel shells. Here's a close-up of them. They are deteriorating, but you can see they are permanently on concrete grave mounds. I also found petrified wood. Sometimes just chunks of petrified wood at the head and the foot of the grave, sometimes little pieces, and sometimes an entire log that's about 10 feet of a petrified tree. I wish I could show it to you without the lichen, but I did not have permission to clean it, and I did not have nearly enough D2 with me. These are found in black cemeteries and white ones. Up in the northeastern corner of the state at Piggott, somebody's entire petrified wood collection has been embedded in front of the courthouse. So that was something I wasn't expecting. I wasn't expecting to find brick. I think in parts of the state that did not have natural stone outcroppings or quarries, lots of different brick constructions. The one on the upper left is at old Lakeport Plantation. That housed the body of a 3-year-old boy. The family expected to go back to Kentucky and take their son with them. They did go back to Kentucky. They left him behind. No one knows why, but that was built so it could be opened from one side. These others look like little storefronts or pyramids. The brick construction was all over the map. And I found clocks. I love finding clocks. Clocks are usually set where the hands set to the time of death. Now this is a black cemetery outside of Camden, Mount Willie, and there are actually two tombstones. And the hands on the left, it says 10 o'clock in the concrete. The other one was also for a minister, and the hands were set at about 5 o'clock. I've also found clocks carved into concrete markers, and I found the remnants of clocks. This is at Fort Smith. This would have had a dial on it, but it's now missing. I found several of those. So again, black cemeteries and white cemeteries. The clock as a reminder of death. This is the time that they died. So I want to talk about one of my favorite things to find in cemeteries. Now, everything I've just told you are favorites of mine. Obviously, if you were to tell me about another clock I hadn't seen or something amazing, I would be in the car tomorrow trying to find it if I could. But of all of these coverings, grave markers, and I find them wonderful, I still say the most interesting thing in the cemetery are the stories. Because every person who has ever died had a story, but we can't access most of them. We just don't know. But there are times when tombstones will hint at us, drop really big hints that this person had something unusual happen to them if we can just figure it out. Now, I can sort of imagine, I'm playing devil's advocate here, but imagine you saying, but Abby, why should a tombstone hint when it can use its words? This is a tombstone that's using its words. This is Solon Borland Blackburn, and he's buried in Mount Holly. Now, a man named Ronald Fuller is transcribing all of the oldest stones in Mount Holly, and he has transcribed all of this. In fact, we know the whole bottom half of that stone, the bottom third, is from a letter written by Solon's brother to their father on the day of the burial. And from all of this text, we know that Solon, who died in New Orleans, was affectionate, obedient, noble, generous, the very soul of honor and worth. He was brave, he was kind-hearted, and his heart and soul were too great for this selfish world. Now, that's a lot to tell us, but does it really tell us anything? Because the real story about Solon is how he died. He was engaged to a young woman who sent him a Dear John letter, and she broke their engagement because of his dissipated ways. And she said, unless you change your ways, we are finished. And Solon, whatever that was, drinking, drugs, probably drinking, just kept on, and 2 years later, he took his own life. And he did it in New Orleans. He rented a dueling pistol. He took out her Dear John letter and wrote on it, "Try to forget me," and then he killed himself. So none of that is even being hinted at in this enormous stone that goes on and on about his virtues. So I think tombstones that hint to us are really interesting because they ask us to do a little work. Here's a stone that is hinting. This is a modern marker. We will always remember how you lived, not how you died. Now, I don't know how this person died, but I do know that this person's obituary asks for money to a mental health charity in lieu of flowers. So there's a story here that is only being hinted at. Now, just speaking of hints and things that are very easy to be hiding in plain sight, we all know what the Masonic compass and square look like. The G stands for God or for geometry. Now, if you were to see this in a graveyard, would you say, oh, I'm looking at another Masonic emblem, but apparently there's something going on, this little arm is in there. The fact is, this emblem is the JOUAM, the Junior Order of American Mechanics. And they were a hate group, and they are hiding behind the Masonic compass and square. The Masons had a very good reputation. The JOUAM had as their purpose to drive out foreigners. They wanted, first of all, only American-born working men to have the jobs, and they did not want competition from the Irish, Germans, and Catholics. And so they were one of 3 hate groups, not counting the Klan, whose whole job was to get rid of immigrant labor and for only native-born people to have the jobs. And by native-born, they meant white men, not Native Americans. So one way, those are 2 ways, the other ways the stones are hinting at us. When you look at older stones from the 1800s, you're gonna see a lot of symbols. And these symbols have very well-known meanings. Lambs, doves, anchors, clasping hands, flowers. You see these over and over and over again, and there's nothing especially hard to interpret here. But sometimes there are symbols that are a little iffy. These are all ropes, and ropes do not actually have a meaning. If you look in a book on symbolism, it will tell you that, maybe it talks about a connection, but mostly ropes are simply decorative. And you can see these are all just used in a decorative way. But then we get looking for his first name, sorry, Mr. Vaughn. It's Sylvanus Vaughn, who has rope going down the sides of his marker. He was hanged for murder. And his family, his wife and his adult children would have picked out this tombstone after he was hanged for murder. So not all stones have got rope on them. So was this a hint at what happened to their father? He has a really great story. I'm trying to see if we have time for this. So he didn't actually kill anybody. He hired a man to kill his enemy. He had several court cases against another man. He was tired of waiting. He was always losing in court. So he hired a neighbor to kill his enemy. This person was almost immediately found out and confessed and simply got life in jail. But Mr. Vaughn, Samuel Vaughn, was sentenced to hang for murder. He was hanged in Fayetteville. His wife and adult children came to visit him in his cell the night before. And when they were told it was time to leave, his wife dropped to her knees and began to pray loudly, "Oh God, please kill my husband." She wanted God to spare her husband the terrible death from hanging. Now, it may just be a coincidence, but one of their adult sons was also a pharmacist and may have slipped the father something. This may have been a cover while he's giving the father something to either kill him or at least knock him out, because the next morning, Samuel Vaughan is unresponsive, and they have to carry him up to the scaffold. And because he cannot stand up on the trap, they strap a very heavy oak board to his back. And that changes the dynamic, shall we say, the calculation. And let's just say it was a botched hanging. It was extremely gory hanging because they hadn't taken the extra weight into account. So he was not in good shape when the hanging was over. So there's the family choosing rope to put on their father and their husband's grave. It's an odd choice. But the real rope story I want to tell you is this one here. Do I need to do a trigger warning? This is going to involve the death of a child. We all okay with our subject matter? Okay. This is in Little Rock, in Oakland and Fraternal, in the Jewish cemetery that is right in the middle. There's actually two Jewish cemeteries, Orthodox and Reform. And the Vogels, if you notice, Moses Vogel and his son Sam die about 3.5 months apart. Now, if you know that Moses died of tuberculosis, which he did, you could argue that Sam must have caught the disease from his father. And 3 months later, this 12, almost 13-year-old boy dies of the same disease. And that's what I thought. I mean, that was my conclusion. Except for this across the top. There's this very big piece of rope. Now, because this is a Jewish cemetery, and because Jewish symbolism is different from Protestant, I contacted a rabbi. Actually, I have a friend who's a rabbi, so he's also written 2 books on symbolism. And Rabbi Siegel said there is nothing in Judaism about rope. We have no tradition of putting rope on tombstones. And so I started doing research. Let me just show you how big this rope is. This is a cable. And the story is that after Moses died, I thought that Sammy probably had to go to work because his mother had a little brother and there was no means of support. But I did find that Sammy's father's lodge paid $2,000 in life insurance to the widow, which is almost $80,000 in today's money. But for whatever reason, Sammy went to work at a department store. This one. This is the Gus Blass department or dry goods store in Little Rock. It was 5 stories tall. And a 5-story building needs a freight elevator. The freight elevator was in a shaft that had a staircase on the inside, possibly for maintenance. And Sammy, whose job was errand boy, he was to pick up money from one department and take it to another. Sammy was obsessed with the elevator. He had been warned repeatedly to stay away from it. It wasn't his job, but he could not do it. And on this day, Sammy goes up into the stairwell and is leaning over the railing to watch the elevator rise in the shaft, not realizing that what goes up has to come down, and an elevator has a counterweight, and a 3/4 ton weight hit him on the back of the head, pinning him to the railing and killing him. I do think that that big stone might have been paid for by the department store, which was found to be not at fault. It was said it was only the curiosity of a child. It said that there was no blame was assigned. The elevator shows that the accident could have been due to nothing but the careless curiosity on the part of the unfortunate youth. Well, another stone that seems to be telling us the story is this one here in Mountain Home. This is Spencer Morris Kennedy Jr., and if you can read what it says on the bottom, it says that he was murdered in cold blood by Newman Harrison, better known as Rip Fee, Marshal of Yellville. I'm indebted to Vincent for this one. He told me about this, and time for me to get it into my book. I snuck a few stories in even after the book was accepted by the publisher. So the story here is that I don't know why Newman Harrison, the Marshal, has an alias. I do know that he was a World War II veteran. And the story is this, that Spencer Kennedy was in Yellville in a cafe with 2 of his brothers. His brothers were named Leif and Charles, and they were all drunk and disorderly. And I don't know if the owner of the cafe called for law enforcement, but the marshal came in and he tried to arrest the 3 brothers, and they put up a fight. And at some point he pulls out his gun and he ends up shooting Spencer Kennedy in the abdomen, and he died. The owner of the cafe was also shot in the leg as she tried to flee out the back door. And after Kennedy had been shot, his two brothers then came after the marshal, took his gun away from him, pistol whipped him, and tried to shoot him at point blank range. They tried 3 times, but the gun jammed. And somehow they must have been subdued and they were taken to prison, charged with manslaughter. Kennedy was exonerated, but he needed medical treatment for his injuries. So there's a stone that isn't telling you the full story. I love stones that lie to us. I'm not saying this is a lie, this is the family's version. But I love stones that tell us whoppers, because a tombstone that is telling us a lie is kind of like a toddler with cookie crumbs around his mouth saying, I didn't eat a cookie. I find these things fascinating. And I'm just going to throw something in that's not in Arkansas, but I want to show you another example of family pride. This is in Memphis, Tennessee, in Elmwood Cemetery, and it says that William Eastman Spandau was killed in a chemical laboratory of Columbia University by an explosion due to the carelessness of others. He was a graduate student in chemical engineering. He was in a lab with a lab partner, and his professor said they were using some type of equipment that was pumped up to a very high amount of pressure. And the instructor reminded them not to let it go over a certain amount. And it looks like this young man deliberately opened some sort of a valve, causing a massive explosion that blew out one side of the building, killing him in the process and blinding his lab partner. A tribunal found William to be completely at fault in this. After all, his lab partner did survive the explosion, but clearly his mother did not agree, and she paid for this very elaborate stone with her side of the story. So I went backwards. So I have one last story, and I know I was here about 2 years ago telling some of my favorite lies that tombstones tell, and I did tell this one at that time. I love this story because, one, it sums up what my book is about. When people would say, well, what kind of stories are you trying to tell? I would say, well, here's an example. In Helena, Arkansas, there's a life-size carving of statue of an Irish setter, and this dog has got his name carved on a collar around his neck. His name was Pedro. And under his paws are the words waiting. And behind him is the word fidelity. So this dog is faithfully waiting, probably for his owner to come back. But his owner was murdered on February 16th, 1893. Now, the thing about this marker is that it's covered in writing. And I'm not going to read you all of it, but here's the important part. It said that Dr. Emil Overton Moore possessed marked individuality. He was incapable of dissimulation, meaning he could not lie. His errors were the errors of a man, and they stood out in bold contrast with the time-serving, two-faced hypocrites who conspired to have him murdered. Show of hands, who thinks there was a conspiracy to have him murdered? Anybody? Here's what happened. Dr. Emil Overton Moore, when he was killed, immediately the newspapers published articles about him, and they did not sugarcoat things. After he was safely dead, they said that he was a violent and revengeful man, and that he was a terror when drinking. One of the newspapers actually said that he had been involved in several scrapes over the years. Now, a scrape is a very serious difficulty. And I went back through the newspapers, and I could not find scrapes in the plural, but I did find that he had, in 2 years earlier, in 1884, 1884, he killed one of his patients with a shotgun, a double-barreled shotgun, shooting him in the guts after the two argued over politics. And he claimed it was self-defense because the old man came at him with an upraised walking stick. And he was acquitted, but it took a long time, and his public opinion was against him. So Dr. Emil Moore was a very violent man. He was frequently drunk, and he was dangerous because he was known to carry a gun. Now, on the morning of February 16th, one of two things happened. There are two newspaper accounts. They don't quite agree. They state that a farmer out in the country, broke either an arm or a leg, and the family called for either Dr. Moore or two doctors, hoping that one would show up. But in any event, Dr. Charles Chenault did show up, and he's in the process of setting this broken bone when Dr. Moore arrives on the scene. and he is angry, which also means he is drunk. The two of them begin arguing over the patient, but that's not very professional, so they take their argument out onto the porch. And now the fight kind of escalates, and at some point, Dr. Moore starts to unbutton his jacket, which is a well-known gesture for some man who's about to reach for his gun. And Dr. Chenault reaches for his own gun and shoots Dr. Moore over the left eye, killing him on the spot. And it's interesting about this because Dr. Moore's sister said that her brother had a prophetic dream just the night before that he would be shot over the left eye by a fellow doctor. So that all came true. Dr. Chenault voluntarily remained in jail until the funeral was over, and then was immediately acquitted on grounds of self-defense because there wasn't a single person in Helena that wouldn't have testified to how dangerous Dr. Moore was. There's another twist to this story, though, and you think that would be the end of it. And I do think that Dr. Moore's parents probably bought this dog statue in Memphis. But when the funeral took place, Dr. Moore's estranged wife had been living in Memphis with her parents, and she came back for the funeral. And come to find out, Dr. Moore had taken his two young children off of his life insurance policy. He had a little boy, 11, and a little girl, 4. And he had taken their names off, and he instead given the life insurance, made the beneficiary Minnie Robertson, his fiancée, a local school teacher. The insurance company tried not to pay her on the grounds that he had been fighting, and therefore he brought upon his own death. But in fact, Minnie Robertson eventually got the money. It was a $5,000 payout, which in 1893 would be worth about $250,000 today. And she had to fight her way through 3 courts, including Little Rock and St. Louis, before she was finally paid with interest by the insurance company. So the business of putting a dog on a grave is not something we have in Arkansas. This is the only example I know of. But I will show you that this is in Cincinnati, and this is a little boy's grave. This is a little boy, if I have this, William Boone Redmond. He was 7 years old, 6 months, 21 days when he died. I don't know what he died of, but the family put a large, actually life-size statue of a dog facing their son's grave. And that dog, I know it's very weathered, but the dog has a tear running down his face, and in his paws is a broken chain with a padlock on one side. So it's representing the link that's been broken, the tie between the family and their child, or the dog and the child. And the dog is there grieving for all eternity on this child's grave. Well, my book ends with a chapter on kind of a how-to manual if you're in a graveyard and you are looking at symbols. There are a lot of symbols that can trip you up. If you think that an anchor means a person was in the Navy, but you've got a great aunt who died when she was 8 years old and there's an anchor on her stone, what's that about? Or some of the fraternal lodge emblems can be very confusing. I write about how to use light to get good pictures, how to safely clean a stone using D2. I write about archaic language, things that might trip you up if you're doing research. But I also write about some of the things I've learned through decades of spending time in graveyards, and I will give you these tonight. 1, carry dog biscuits, because you never know when you need to make a friend. And number 2, always check the back of the tombstone. Some of the older stones I have seen, in fact, in old Athens, there's a row of stones. They're very primitive, they're very beautiful. But if you look around the back, one says, loving mother. Another one says that these stones were made by the grandson and gives the date. Another stone says, knew the Bible by heart. The backs of the stones might give you an additional couple of verses of an epitaph. It might give you the cause of death, killed by a falling tree, the name of the carver. You never know, just artwork. And modern markers, sky's the limit. I have seen pedigree charts, genealogy charts. I have seen aerial views of the family farm. I've seen the person's tattoos. I've also seen deliberate humor. One of my favorite examples was, I've made many deals in my lifetime, but I sure went in the hole on this one. I've done that twice so far. Or I told you I was sick. Surprising number of stones for that matter. Or here we have Cecil Rankin, our beloved mother. So here's my email address. It's abby@arkansas.gmail. If you are in a graveyard and you find something wonderful and you just want to share, please do. If you're doing family research and you're having trouble reading a stone, if you're having trouble reading an epitaph, or find the name of the carver. If you have a symbol, or you have a lodge emblem, something that's very odd. I've had people ask me about the Daughters of Rebecca. Is this satanic? It's a crescent moon with a dove and 7 stars. Some of the fraternal lodge emblems are very odd. They have skulls, they have ravens. If you have something you're trying to do research on and you're having problems, send me a picture. I live for this, I truly do. I love helping people. I cannot help you with military markers. I am not a war historian. I can't help you with military cemeteries. But if it is something to do with the verses, the carvers, the symbols, the symbolism, please send me a picture. And if you find something amazing you want to share, please do that too. So thank you all very much. Do we have time for any questions, or we just, a couple questions? Yes.
I got one. My family manages the Oak Grove Cemetery, and in that cemetery, there's 3 different plots that are like tombs. They're made of really gigantic size limestone, sandstone rocks. And they have signs on it, all 4 corners, and a great big top. Was there any particular occasion that, and there's more than one cemetery in this area that has that type of thing, and I know that there was a plague epidemic that killed a lot of children, like somewhere, maybe in the early 1800s around here, and I'm just wondering if there's any symbolism associated with those graves that are common.
Not that I know of. First of all,
what I'm talking about, have you seen it?
oh yes, yeah, they're called false crypts. They're not, a crypt is actually a hole in the ground, but a false crypt is it's built up. It's either built like a big box, sometimes it's just slabs of stone. If it's a giant slab, sometimes people call them wolf stone to keep wolves from digging into the grave. That is, I'm sorry, it's nonsense, because you don't put a heavy structure on a fresh grave. The grave is going to settle as the coffin collapses. You put that heavy weight on the grave up to maybe a year or more later. So those big structures were whatever the family brought traditions with them. Very often they represent the grave underneath. There's no connection, and mostly they're like pre-Civil War. They were enormous amounts of work to create, and I think a lot of them, some of the ones I know of, were probably all made at the same time. People died at different times, but quarrying and hauling and erecting that kind of rock weight would have taken a lot of equipment, and I've probably done it once. I also don't think there's any connection between in terms of epidemics. In other words, if you're saying, was it to protect the living from, the germ theory wasn't really understood, so it wasn't really protective. You don't put all that on the grave, including the grave houses or the stone coffins. You do that after the grave has had time to settle. But those big slabs, those big boxes, are kind of in line with the stone coffins. Sometimes the boxes are very squared and perfect, like the ones in Old Athens that have the head and footstones. There's all kinds of variations on that style. So I think in your case, it would be whatever the family tradition was that they brought with them. So does that help? I'm not sure.
I appreciate it.
Okay. Way in the back.
Do you know anything more about the woodmen of the world and their insurance they sold?
Woodmen of the World, well, actually, it was Modern Woodmen of America. It was started by Joseph Cullen Root in the 1880s, and it was meant to insure only men in the healthiest professions. So you could not be a saloon keeper, work in a dynamite factory, work in a coal mine, work on a railroad. They didn't really want to have to pay out. And they invented the idea of the big tree trunk.
Nothing new about that.
The tree trunks are very different styles because different carvers made them. The company would provide money for them, and eventually, by 1920, it just came down to a little emblem. They gave you a death benefit. They stopped providing the actual tombstone. Not all tree trunks are woodman markers. There was a fad for called the rustic look, so you had this fake tree trunks or mark on things. Was done a lot, and so unless you find that emblem with the Dum Tacet Clamet, the Latin, or the modern woodsman, which is a shield and crossed axe and splitting maul, unless you find that, it's not a woodsman. So does that help? Over here? Yes.
Your research is impressive. Is there any particular source or so that you found like really helpful? Like when you would go down these rabbit holes?
Newspapers.com. I did not have it when I wrote Gone to the Grave, and I deeply regret that, because I think in Gone to the Grave, I said there was actually a female tombstone carver here in Baxter County, and I said, nothing is known about her. A lot is known about her, I just didn't know how to find it. I have Ancestry, newspapers.com. Reference librarians are wonderful sources. Vince has been incredibly helpful with different research subjects. Just searching online, and I have to say, I had the most wonderful experience with this book. This is not actually a research answer. Time and again, the person I needed would show up when I needed them, which is just, it reaches a whole new level. I mean, it happened 8 or 10 times. I would be in an isolated graveyard and someone would show up and we'd get chatting and they would be the exact person I needed to answer a question. My favorite example, and I kept looking for James Whitlow in case he was here because he came to one of my talks. I was in Walnut Ridge trying to find the grave of the man who was killed on horseback when struck by a train. None of it true, but that's what Atlas Obscura will tell you. And this grave is out in a cornfield. I couldn't find it, and I went to the local library, and they said, well, we don't know where it is, but there's one man who can help you. Go sit down, we'll try to call him. Oh, look, here he comes now. I mean, that happened over and over. It happened down at Burnt Schoolhouse. I was looking for the grave of a man who had been killed by the stake, he was electrocuted, and there were men there going to do a building project, and one was, oh, my father went to that guy's funeral. I mean, I was in a graveyard trying to find something, and a man drives by thinking I'm looking for family. Can I help you? I'm looking for this thing. Oh, he says, well, my father remembered that story. You're at the wrong spot. It's over here. That's not the right, that kind of thing. It happens so many times. So you can't actually build that into your research, and then the miraculous will happen, but it really did a lot. Yes.
I wonder, there's a mass grave in West Plains from the explosion.
Yes, the dance hall.
Is that something that you see in numerous places, or is that sort of unique?
The West Plains dance halls, like in the 1920s, all these young people were dancing and the building exploded. They were buried in, I think it was like 15 to 18 people, just a row of coffins, and there's one big monument to them. And no one to this day knows what caused that explosion. In Arkansas, the mass graves that I find tend to be tornadoes. And so you see a family with the same death date, and it'll be a tornado death. Now, in my book, I tell the story of one family that was all killed. Well, I have a couple, again, they're all, in my book I have several stories, but they're tornado deaths. There was one over in Marble, Arkansas, where a whole family, except for the father was away at work, family's killed in a tornado, they're buried in one big grave, but it's very hard to tell. The little tombstones just have 1945 death date, they don't give you the exact date. And then the father had the misfortune of meeting a woman through a Lonely Hearts Club, and she was a mass murderer, and he was like husband number 5 that she poisoned. So I tell the story of that. Sorry, is that a question? Yes, in back.
Do you do anything with Indian burials and burials along with trail of tears?
I do not, I really have not gone into Native American in my book, but I do have one, since you brought that up, I do have one point to make, if I can find my note card. Did you know that the oldest open air, the oldest cemetery in the New World is in Arkansas? It dates back to the Dalton culture, which was the end of the Ice Age, so between 8,500 and 1000 BCE. This culture had an actual graveyard in Arkansas, somewhere in the near Crowley's Ridge, upper northeastern quadrant of the state. It's been called the Sloan Site. It's in Greene County, Arkansas, and it's been covered back over. So you cannot go see it. It was excavated, about 30 graves, so they're finding human bones and stone tools. And there was no sign of habitation. There wasn't anybody living there, so clearly bodies were being taken to this site for burial. They don't know if the stone tools were there for the afterlife or as a kind of a grave good, it belonged to the person and it's going with them. But that is the oldest known cemetery in the New World, and we have it as our claim to fame. We just can't see any of it, and the stone tools, I guess, were taken to the University of Arkansas in Fayetteville, and they closed the museum, so I think it's by appointment. But pot hunters, or people were going in and excavating, and the landowner was tired of it. because the Dalton points are really collectible. And so he allowed the University of Arkansas to come in and excavate back in the 1970s. There is a book out called The Sloan Site, which you can buy through the University of Arkansas Press. So that's the only Native American. I talk about Helena Crossing. There was a very elaborate burial there of a Native American. I don't know if it was a boy or a girl, with all kinds of elaborate jewelry. That's also been covered over again. So I do actually have several things. In my first chapter, where I go back to the very earliest graveyards in Arkansas, I actually do write a little bit about Native American burials. It's not the main part of my book, but I do cover that a little bit.
Can I just throw something out?
Yes.
There's a park ranger at Lake Dardanelle who's kind of an expert on Cherokee, if that helps you.
Thank you.
Miss Evie?
Yes.
There's a burial in Mount Holly, there's a couple burials in Mount Holly Cemetery in Hill Rock, Arkansas during the Cherokee Trail of Tears of one lady and another guy that was on a steamboat and they were sick and they died.
Oh, thank you.
Mount Holly Cemetery.
Is it also the wife of
It's the wife of,
Stan Wadey?
yes.
Yes, and I think hers is a replacement stone. I think they came in with a newer one because the old one.
Right, if you go back, you keep going straight back, it's almost to the fence.
Mount Holly is my Disneyland. It's amazing. Every time I go there, I find things I didn't see before. So it's got portraits. It's got some great stuff in it.
What's been some of your best Memorial Days?
Memorial Days. Back when I was working on Gone to the Grave, I was trying to get out to cemeteries for Decoration Day, when people were coming back just to decorate, because that was a remnant of a really old tradition. As far as Memorial Day goes, I haven't really done anything on Memorial Day. Sorry. Yes.
Just a comment, some people may know about the last hanging in Harrison, Arkansas, and the man that was killed or hung, they cut the rope into pieces and threw it out into the crowd, and he was buried by his sister in Maplewood Cemetery. There's a book of Remembering Ella, that in 2023, his cousin, who was the sheriff up there at that time, said that he was actually the murderer, and that he just decided to hang it on his cousin.
Well, Otis went to the scaffold insisting they were hanging an innocent man. I tell that story in my Gone to the Grave book. I don't think I go into it in this one, but he has an interesting marker because it says, "Here rest the ashes of Otis Davis," and people think he was cremated. There were no cremations in Arkansas until I think the 1970s even. So it's just antiquated language, but that is a really good story.
And the tombstone has been damaged a couple of times a little bit.
I don't remember seeing any terrible damage, more like lawnmower damage. I mean, it hasn't been vandalized that I know of.
It's been broken off the base a couple
Okay.
times.
I guess I'm going to thank you all very much for all your great questions.